What if the food you believed was your healthiest habit was actually the architect of your decline? For millions of seniors, a simple daily snack, one often recommended for heart health, could be quietly fueling the very ailments they fear most: crippling joint pain, stubborn high blood pressure, and the frustrating fog of memory loss. The culprit isn't some exotic chemical or a junk food you already know to avoid. It's something found in nearly every kitchen pantry, a food tied to memories, to routine, and to a lifetime of belief in its goodness. You may even have it in your own home right now. Today, we're not just giving you a list of facts, we're telling a story. The story of Silas Croft, a proud, independent man who discovered that his favorite armchair companion was also his greatest enemy. In our first chapter, which we are about to begin, we will step inside Silas's quiet world, a world where the comfort of routine is about to be shattered by a devastating truth, and a granddaughter's love is about to spark a revolution. If you believe in the power of stories to teach and inspire, please take a moment to press the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more important narratives like Silas's to life. Now, let's step into that late autumn afternoon and begin now. The late autumn light, thin and pale, struggled through the old glass of the window panes, casting long, weary shadows across the living room floor. Outside, a persistent wind whispered through the bare branches of the great oak in the front yard, a mournful sound that seemed to seep through the very walls of the house. Inside, the air was still, thick with the comforting scents of old books, lemon oil polish, and the faint, ghost-like aroma of sawdust that clung to the furniture, a lingering memory from a workshop that had long since fallen silent. This was Silas Croft's world, a world contained within the sturdy walls he had raised with his own hands half a century ago. At 72, he felt as though he were becoming a part of the house itself, weathered, quiet, and filled with memories that creaked like floorboards in the night. He sat in his favorite armchair, a worn leather sentinel that had molded to the shape of his body over thousands of afternoons. In his lap lay the daily newspaper, its headlines a blur of distant troubles. His focus, however, was on a small, frustrating task. His right hand, a landscape of swollen knuckles and prominent blue veins, fumbled with the top button of his flannel shirt. The fingers that had once guided saws with perfect precision and coaxed dovetail joints into seamless unions now refused to obey. They were clumsy, stiff, traitors to his will. With a sigh of frustrated air, he gave up, leaving the collar slightly askew. It was a small defeat, but it was one of many that now populated his days. Worse than the rebellion of his hands was the fog that now drifted, uninvited, into the quiet corners of his mind. It would roll in without warning, stealing words from the tip of his tongue or smudging the edges of a cherished memory. Just this morning, he had been telling the mailman about his old dog, Barney, and had stood there, mouth agape, unable to recall the name of the street they used to walk down every single day. The name had eventually returned. Hours later, a welcome but frustratingly tardy guest. He reached for the one constant, the one simple pleasure that never failed him. A blue ceramic bowl sat on the end table, filled to the brim with a mix of oil-roasted peanuts and cashews, glistening with a fine coat of salt. The sound of his fingers rustling through them was a familiar comfort. He believed them to be a bastion of health in his simple diet, a good, honest source of protein. He popped a few into his mouth, the satisfying crunch, a small, percussive counterpoint to the silence of the house. The front door opened, letting in a swirl of cold air and a gust of life. "Grandpa, I'm here, Rowan." His granddaughter's voice was like a splash of bright color in his monochrome afternoon. She entered the room, her cheeks pink from the cold, a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder. At 25, she had a quiet way of observing the world, an artist's eye that missed nothing, especially not the small cumulative signs of his fading. "How was your morning?" she asked, her voice warm as she bent to kiss his forehead. "The usual," Silas grunted, gesturing vaguely at the newspaper. "Same world, different day." Rowan's eyes scanned the room. She noticed the small stack of unopened mail on the mantelpiece and the crossword puzzle on the ottoman, only a quarter finished, its empty squares like gaps in a conversation. She saw the way he searched for a common word, his gaze turning inward as if trying to navigate a poorly lit room in his own mind. "I brought you that book you were asking about," she said, pulling it from her bag. Silas looked at it, a flicker of confusion in his eyes before recognition dawned. "Ah, right. Good. Thank you." She hesitated, then sat on the edge of the ottoman, her expression gentle but laced with a worry she could no longer hide. "Grandpa, I was thinking, maybe we could see about getting you into that seniors yoga class down at the community center. Mrs. Gable says it's done wonders for her joints." Silas bristled, his back straightening against the worn leather. "Yoga. I'm a carpenter, not a pretzel." "I'm just getting old, Rowan," he said, the words a well-worn shield. "It happens to everyone. No need to fuss." "It's not fussing," she replied softly. "It's caring. I just worry about you." He waved a dismissive hand, the gesture meant to be resolute but slightly trembling. He reached for another handful of nuts, the crunching sound filling the tense silence between them. He loved his granddaughter more than anything, but he hated this. He hated being a project, a problem to be solved. His independence was the last thing he truly owned, and he would not let it be dismantled by well-meaning concern. Rowan stayed for another hour, tidying up, telling him about her latest design project, her cheerful chatter, a stark contrast to his one-word replies. When it was time for her to leave, he pushed himself up from the chair. It was a slow, deliberate process. His hands pressed down hard on the armrests, his joints groaning in protest as he fought against the simple, crushing weight of gravity. From the doorway, Rowan watched him. She saw the strain in his face, the tremor in his arms, the deep weariness in his posture. Her gaze drifted to the side table, to the blue ceramic bowl, now empty save for a few stray flakes of salt. An unsettling thought, sharp and clear, cut through her worry. The very thing he reached for as a comfort might just be the anchor weighing him down. That night, sleep offered Rowan no peace. Haunted by the image of her grandfather's struggle, she found herself bathed in the cold light of her laptop screen. Driven by a desperate intuition, she typed the words that would change everything. Foods that cause inflammation in seniors. One click led to another, and a devastating picture began to form. She saw Silas's gnarled hands in articles about the inflammatory fire stoked by the high omega-6 content in peanuts. She saw his moments of mental confusion reflected in studies linking the blood sugar spikes from cashews to cognitive fog. Then came the most terrifying discovery, the word aflatoxin, a poison from mold common in peanuts, linked to liver and kidney strain, a silent threat to an already aging system. It wasn't just old age. It was a quiet, daily poisoning disguised as a healthy snack. The next morning, she approached him, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She tried to explain her findings gently, her voice laced with an urgency she couldn't hide. Silas listened, his expression hardening from disbelief to a deep, impenetrable stubbornness. "Nonsense," he cut in, his voice sharp. "I've been eating peanuts my whole life. They're good for you." He looked away, his gaze fixed on a point in the past only he could see. "Your grandmother, she loved them. We used to sit right here, sharing a bowl while the snow fell. She'd always pick out the cashews just for me, and there it was." Rowan saw that she wasn't fighting against a habit, she was fighting against a memory. She was arguing with a ghost. The facts, no matter how clear or alarming, could not penetrate a heart shielded by love and loss. Defeated, she said no more. But as she left his house that day, a new resolve settled over her. If she couldn't win with words, she would have to win with actions. Her war would not be fought with confrontation, but with quiet, loving cunning. That afternoon, she walked into the grocery store, bypassing the familiar aisle of roasted peanuts, and began to gather her new silent weapons: raw almonds, walnuts, and a plan. The air in Dr. Evans's office was sterile and smelled faintly of antiseptic. It was a place of brisk efficiency, where lives were measured in 15-minute increments. Silas sat on the crinkly paper of the examination table, his posture stiff, while Rowan perched on the edge of a visitor's chair, a folder of printed articles clutched in her hands like a shield. Dr. Evans bustled in, a man perpetually in a hurry. He offered a tight, professional smile as he glanced at the chart in his hands. "Well, Silas, let's see what we have here." He wrapped the cuff around Silas's arm, pumped it up, and watched the needle on the gauge. He let out a low whistle, still stubbornly high. Higher than last time, in fact. He scribbled on his notepad, his pen scratching across the paper. I'm going to prescribe a different medication, a stronger one. We need to get these numbers down before they cause real trouble." He spoke matter-of-factly, listing potential side effects: dizziness, fatigue, muscle cramps, as if reading a grocery list. This was Rowan's opening. She cleared her throat, and the sound was small in the quiet room. "Doctor," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I've been doing some research. I was wondering if diet could be playing a bigger role than we think." Specifically, she took a breath. "I read that certain nuts, like peanuts, can be highly inflammatory and affect the cardiovascular system." Dr. Evans finally looked up, his gaze moving from Silas to Rowan. He offered a patient, almost patronizing smile. "It's good that you're taking an active interest, young lady. And yes, diet is a factor, of course." He waved a dismissive hand. "But at his age, medication is our primary tool. It's the most reliable way to manage hypertension. Just make sure he avoids excess salt and fatty foods." He turned back to his prescription pad. "A few nuts are perfectly fine. In fact, some are good for the heart." His words, meant to be reassuring, landed like a stone in Rowan's stomach. He had grouped all nuts together, completely missing the specific, nuanced point of her research. He saw an anxious granddaughter with a handful of internet printouts, not a legitimate concern. Silas, however, felt a wave of vindication. He shot Rowan a triumphant, "I told you so" look. The doctor, the man of science, had confirmed it. A few nuts were fine. On the drive home, the car was thick with a tense silence. "See," Silas finally said, breaking it. "The doctor knows best. A whole lot of fuss over nothing." For Silas, the matter was settled. But for Rowan, the doctor's casual dismissal was not an end, it was a call to action. She now saw the path ahead with stark clarity. The conventional system would offer only a succession of pills, each treating a symptom while the root cause continued to fester. The health system wasn't going to save him. She would have to. The stakes were no longer just about convincing her proud, stubborn grandfather. They were about proving an entire system of dismissive authority wrong. Rowan knew that a head-on battle was a losing one. So, she began a quiet revolution, a campaign fought not with words, but with subtle, loving strategy. She didn't throw out Silas's bowl of peanuts, an act of open warfare he would never forgive. Instead, she began to introduce alternatives, weaving them seamlessly into the fabric of his routine. Her first move was baking. One afternoon, she arrived with a tin of warm oatmeal cookies. Trying a new recipe, she announced cheerfully. The cookies were delicious, with a rich, nutty flavor. Silas ate 3 without comment. He didn't know that Rowan had replaced half the flour with finely ground raw almonds, packing them with magnesium and healthy fats. Next, she tackled the snack bowl itself. She bought a bag of raw, unsalted almonds and a container of walnuts. She mixed them into his existing supply of peanuts and cashews, tilting the ratio heavily in favor of the newcomers. "Made you a trail mix," she said casually. "Thought it could use a little more variety." She became a master of strategic placement. She left a small bowl of walnuts on the table next to his crossword puzzles. "I read these are like food for the brain," she mentioned offhandedly as she was leaving one day. "They even look like little brains, don't they?" The visual connection was a seed planted in his mind. He found himself studying one, its 2 halves like the lobes of a brain, before popping it into his mouth. She also introduced pistachios, leaving a small bowl of the shelled nuts on the coffee table. She explained how the simple, repetitive act of shelling them was a good exercise for his stiff fingers, a small-scale physical therapy session. It also, she noted, slowed down the eating process, making it a more mindful act. Silas was suspicious at first, but he didn't actively resist. The cookies were good, and the new mix was crunchy enough. His next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a warm and insightful woman with a garden full of prize-winning roses, became an unwitting ally. "Oh, pistachios," she exclaimed one afternoon, seeing the bowl on Silas's table. "My doctor told me to eat those for my blood pressure. And you know, I think they actually help." Her words, coming from a peer, carried a weight that Rowan's never could. Silas listened, filing the information away without comment. Rowan, who had been watering his houseplants, overheard and shared a quiet, grateful smile with the older woman. The quiet revolution was gaining an ally. As autumn bled into the grey chill of winter, the first signs of change began to appear. They were not dramatic or sudden, but quiet, subtle shifts, like the slow melting of ice from a frozen window pane. The progress was so gradual that at first, Silas himself barely noticed it. The change was first felt in his hands. One morning he woke up, and as he flexed his fingers, he realized the usual sharp, biting pain in his knuckles had receded to a dull, manageable throb. Later that day, he went to the kitchen for a snack and on impulse, grasped a stubborn jar of pickles. He gave it a twist. For the first time in what felt like years, the lid groaned and gave way. He stood there for a moment, looking at the open jar in his hand, a small but monumental victory. The fog in his mind also began to lift, not all at once, but in patches. While working on a crossword puzzle, a clue stumped him. A famous actor, last name Gable. He stared at it, the answer just out of reach, a familiar frustration building. Then, in a sudden, brilliant flash, the name came to him, Clark. He wrote it in the empty squares with a firm, satisfying stroke. His eyes drifted to the bowl of walnuts on the table. He picked one up, studying its brain-like shape with a new sense of curiosity, a flicker of something that felt like hope. He began to actively choose the walnuts and almonds from the mix, his fingers bypassing the familiar shape of the peanuts. He still wouldn't admit anything to Rowan. His pride remained a formidable barrier, but she saw it. She saw the subtle improvements he was too stubborn to acknowledge. She saw it in the healthy, ruddy color returning to his cheeks, replacing the pale, washed-out look he'd had for months. She saw it in the brighter, more focused look in his eyes when she told him a story. And most of all, she saw it when she arrived one afternoon to find him not in his armchair, but in the doorway of his dusty, silent workshop. He was holding a small piece of pine, sanding its edges with a slow, rhythmic motion, the scent of wood dust once again perfuming the air. The long winter was beginning to thaw. 3 months after his last visit, it was time for Silas's follow-up with Dr. Evans. This time, the mood in the sterile office was different. Rowan felt a quiet confidence, and Silas, though he wouldn't admit it, seemed less resigned, more present. Dr. Evans came in with the same brisk energy, but his expression changed as he took Silas's blood pressure. He took it a second time, a puzzled look on his face. "Well," he said, finally looking up from the gauge, "this is quite a significant improvement. A very significant improvement." He checked his notes. "The new medication is clearly doing its job." "Excellent." This was the moment Silas had been waiting for. He cleared his throat, and his voice was steady and clear when he spoke. "The pills might have helped some, Doc," he said, looking Dr. Evans directly in the eye. But that's not the whole story. With a surprising amount of detail and confidence, Silas began to explain. He told the doctor about the changes Rowan had initiated. He spoke of almonds for calcium and magnesium, walnuts for brain health, and the 1 or 2 Brazil nuts he now ate every day for selenium and thyroid support, a detail Rowan had recently added to their regimen. He talked, in simple but clear terms, about what he had learned about inflammation, omega-6, fatty acids, and blood sugar. Dr. Evans listened, his pen hovering over the chart. His initial, patronizing smile had been replaced by a look of genuine surprise and perhaps a hint of grudging respect. The evidence was right there in the medical chart, an undeniable set of numbers that defied his expectations. He couldn't argue with the results. "Well, Silas," he conceded, finally setting his pen down, "it seems your granddaughter's research has been remarkably beneficial. Whatever you're doing, keep it up." It was more than a medical victory. It was a reclaiming of his own agency, his own intellect. On the quiet car ride home, the tension from their last trip was gone, replaced by a comfortable peace. As they pulled into the driveway, Silas turned to Rowan. He looked at her, his eyes clear and full of a gratitude he could no longer conceal. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were right." The arrival of spring that year felt like a personal renaissance for Silas. As the first crocuses pushed their way through the thawing earth and the days grew longer and warmer, he felt a corresponding vitality surging through his own veins. His world, once shrinking to the confines of his armchair, began to expand again. The first, most telling sign was the sound that began to drift from the garage. It was the rhythmic rasp of a hand plane on wood, the gentle tap-tap-tap of a chisel. The doors to his workshop, which had been closed and silent for years, were now thrown wide open, letting the bright spring sunlight spill across the dusty floor. The rich, clean scent of freshly cut pine once again filled the air, a fragrance of purpose and creation. He had started a new project. For the first time in a decade, he was building something from scratch, a beautifully designed rocking horse, a gift for Mrs. Gable's first great-grandchild. His hands, though still bearing the marks of age, moved with a newfound sureness and strength. The pain had not vanished entirely, but it had retreated, becoming a quiet background note rather than a deafening roar. His renewed energy was not just physical, but social. He started walking down to the corner cafe to join his old friends for their weekly coffee meeting, a ritual he had abandoned years ago because the effort of following multiple conversations had become too exhausting. Now, he was not just present, he was an active participant, telling stories from his youth, cracking jokes, his old wit and dry charm returning like a long-lost friend. This chapter of his life was about the ripple effect of good health. It wasn't merely the absence of sickness, it was the vibrant, joyful presence of purpose, of connection, of life itself. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Rowan found him in the workshop, carefully carving the curve of the horse's mane. He looked up as she entered, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "Here," he said, holding out a small, sharp chisel. "Let me show you how to get this line just right. You have to feel the grain of the wood. You have to listen to it." As Rowan took the tool, her hand guided by his, she felt a wave of profound gratitude. He was passing on his skills, his knowledge, his legacy. A legacy she had feared was being erased by the slow, cruel fog of time, but was now being carved anew, right before her eyes. The story concludes in the full, glorious bloom of a New England summer. The world was alive with color and sound, and so was Silas Croft. He was not miraculously young again. The years had left their indelible mark. But he was vibrant, he was engaged, and he was in control of his own health in a way he had never thought possible. One evening, as he and Rowan sat on the front porch watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance, he turned to her. "What we learned," he said, his voice thoughtful. "It feels wrong to keep it to ourselves. There are a lot of people out there just like I was, thinking they're doing the right thing, feeling worse every day." An idea took shape between them. They decided their journey was too important not to share. Over the next few weeks, they worked together on a new project, one that required no wood or nails. Using Rowan's clean, elegant design skills and Silas's straightforward, honest words, they created a simple pamphlet. They titled it, "Silas's Pantry: Simple Swaps for a Sharper Senior Life." It detailed his story in his own words, the fog, the pain, the dismissal, and the quiet revolution. It clearly and simply listed the 4 good nuts and the 4 to approach with caution, explaining the reasons without complicated jargon. The final scene of our story takes place not in the workshop or the living room, but at the local senior center. Silas and Rowan stand behind a small folding table, a neat stack of their pamphlets between them. A small but curious group of his peers has gathered around. Silas is speaking, not with the uncertainty of a patient, but with the quiet confidence of an advocate. He shares his story with warmth and humor, his hands gesturing not with pained stiffness, but with expressive energy. He is no longer just Silas Croft, the retired carpenter. He is a source of wisdom, a testament to the power of small changes, and a beacon of hope for those navigating their own twilight years. He had come to realize that his true legacy wasn't only in the sturdy furniture he had built to last a lifetime. It was in the simple, powerful knowledge he could now share to help others live the remainder of their lives with dignity, clarity, and vitality. Outro to the audience. And so, Silas's journey shows us that it's never too late to rewrite our own stories. It reminds us that sometimes the smallest changes, the simplest swaps in our daily routines, can lead to the most profound transformations. Thank you for joining us for the story of the Walnut Legacy. We hope it has brought you a measure of inspiration and hope. If you or someone you love has a similar story about how a small change made a big difference, we would love to read about it in the comments below. Your story could be the spark that helps someone else begin their own journey. Until next time, Take care of yourselves and each other.